A while back I came across a small set, really a duo, of questions to ask atheists about love. I've held off, but since St. Valentines Day is coming up, like Christmas, it's another holiday that's been co-opted by us heathens. I figured I'd do a quick response this week. It's something I'm familiar with. I have loved and have been loved for a while now. Thank you. Hey! 1. How do you define love? Well, clearly, the first way that anyone should respond to this question is obviously, baby don't hurt me, no more.
What is love? Baby, don't hurt me, no more.
Honestly, love is such a universal thing, and yet is incredibly hard to describe. Most of us think we understand love. However, like Justice Stewart's description of pornography, most of us can't define it, but know it when we see it. It's something that's been attempted to be defined by writers and poets and other speech-talky type people who are better word thingies than some clueless flunky like me on the internet. We could talk about the actions of people in love, of romance, flowers, and candy, from dating to just hanging with each other. We could talk about long-term commitments, like marriage, living together, and sharing a life with someone. We can describe the act of physical love, the raw, animal passion between two, or more, people. Or we could get technical and talk about the chemical reactions in our brain, which show exactly what we go through when we're in love. But none of these, to me, describe what love is, simply what causes it and what results from it. I pretty much have to turn to the good book for the best definition that I found. Love is that condition in which the happiness of another person is essential to your own. Simply put, love is where you put the happiness of another person above yourself. Everyone that I love, my friends, my family, my romantic partners, all have that in common, that I'll give up some measure of my happiness for theirs. I'll waste money on flowers that will die in a few days, that I could spend on myself, because the happiness that I know my wife will receive when she sees them makes me happy as well. I'll help my friends move, a back-breaking chore, because getting them safely to their new home makes them happy, which again, makes me happy. So that's how I define love. If making somebody happy makes you happy, simply because they're happy, and if they're not happy, you aren't, that's love. And sometimes love does mean putting off happiness for a while. I love my kids, and they didn't like going to the doctor, but when they had to go, I took them because their long-term happiness was more important than their current short-term happiness. This brings us to the second, and what the author thinks is the more important question. 2. Can you prove love scientifically? The author seems to think that if you can't prove love exists, but accept that it does, you should do the same for God. Well, how do we prove anything scientifically? Through observation and evidence. Obviously, as an emotion, we can't capture or dissect love, although we can measure the chemical composition of the brain and how it changes when people experience love. But let's look at the claim and see if what we call love exists. Darwin didn't observe things evolving directly in the lab, although this was shown in a lab later on. He saw different species of animals thriving in different environments. He took what he saw and based his theory on those observations. Let's observe the world around us and see if people in love match what we, or at least I, think love is. Since the first question was basically, what is the definition of love? If we're using my definition of it, and let's face it, it's my video so we're going to, what could we observe that would point to the existence of love? The first thing that comes to mind is sacrifice. Would you sacrifice something to make another happy, showing that their happiness is essential to your own? I've sacrificed to people I don't have any kind of direct emotional connection with. I often give change to the needy when I see them. I don't love them directly, but I love humanity enough in general that I will give to those in need. That's empathy, something I've talked about in the past that we've evolved as a social species. The kind of love we're talking about causes us to make major sacrifices to raise the happiness of specific people. Here's an example. Early in the relationship with a woman who would later become my wife, she was going to school and working in a different province than me. To my American viewers, that's like a state, but in general much bigger. I won't go into the details, but I was going through a rough time in my life and had gotten some upsetting news. When she heard about it, she dropped her studies and work to fly out to be with me and comfort me. It was not in her best interest to come out. It was not logical for her to miss her obligations or pay for a flight she couldn't afford at the time. But she knew I was upset and didn't hesitate to fly out to me. We had each said we loved the other one before. I knew I felt it, and I believed her when she said it to me. But that action was evidence that my happiness was essential to hers and that she loved me. So let's look at this. Claim. Love does exist. Definition of love. People will act in such a way that the happiness of another person is essential to their own. Observation. People have and still do act in such a way that the happiness of another person is essential to their own. Observations support the claim. Conclusion, love exists. There are many stories out there of people who put the happiness of others above their own need in much more dramatic ways than mine, but there you go. Observable evidence that people act in accordance to this emotion we call love. And, as I've mentioned before, we've been able to observe and record the chemicals that flood the brain when we experience love. Oxytocin is the bonding drug, dopamine is the feel-good drug. Basically, chemicals that flood the brain causing what we experience when we are in love. We have objective proof that this occurs, making love something that we can experience in a lab. As a side note, the originator's logic is flawed. Even if we said there was a phenomenon we couldn't prove, that doesn't mean we should accept all claims. If we couldn't prove love, like Pierre, the original author, claims, does that mean we have to accept every unfounded claim? If that was the case, and we couldn't prove something, we have to accept all claims? Even contradicting ones? For instance, would we then have to say that both the Norse and Greek gods exist, and both Thor and Zeus are responsible for lightning? Which is what we would have to do if we took the original argument to its logical conclusion. So, the actions of people demonstrate this emotion called love, and it has been proven to be related to certain chemical compositions in the brain. Now, you said if love can be shown to exist, you would do the same for God. So, what evidence do you have?
What about love? Don't you want someone to care about you? What about love? Don't let it slip away. What about love? Oh.
Well, that was fun. Nice little duo. Let's see what's coming up next. Oh, hey, another duo. Well, that was fun. Nice little duo. Let's see what's coming up next. Oh, hey, another set of two. Eric Covent. Why is that name familiar?